So happy to have you along. Thanks for joining us here on the Blue Files. My name is Anwar Knight. On today's show, wow, we're going to look at a bold initiative coming out of Spain as they get set to launch a 4-day work week. Plus, new science tells us that all those aerosols we use, the hairspray, it's causing what I call bathroom smog. And we're also going to meet a unique artist who's sending an eco message in a bottle, a plastic one. To help me unpack some of these stories, a warm welcome once again to our West Coast contributor, Christina Stevens. Hey, welcome back to the Big Blue Marble Studio.
Thanks so much, Anwar. I'm particularly looking forward to talking about that 4-day work week. But first of all, I'm going to put you on the spot. Last week we had a challenge because we talked about the algae dress. A challenge: find something in your closet that's environmentally sustainable, recycled, or some kind of material that's different. And
I have to tell you, I gave it a real attempt. I looked through a lot of labels. And of course, we're still in lockdown here in the province of Ontario, stay-at-home orders. And maybe it would defeat the purpose if I went and bought one.
Cheating.
But I have to tell you, what's that?
That would be cheating.
Yeah, that would be cheating. You're right. It would be cheating. So unfortunately, I didn't. I found one shirt that had some bamboo fiber, but it was, only like 20%. So I thought that really isn't that fair. But I will tell you, it does have my blinders now off. Right? I'm now going to be more conscious of that. Now I have to ask you, were you successful? Are you wearing some, plankton dress?
Unfortunately, I did not fare much better. In fact, it's kind of embarrassing. The best I could come up with, are you ready for it? A vintage purse. So that's the reuse part. But that's it. I have my entire closet, which is embarrassing, right? But as you said, this points out something we can do better.
Absolutely. Now, when you say vintage, and again, I'm not an expert, are we talking 20 years, 30 years? Do you know how long it dates back?
I think this was, I'm trying to remember, I want to say 80s. It was an
really?
80s
Okay.
kind of a...
Okay,
yeah.
because I thought you were going to qualify by 2 years ago.
Well, technically that would still count. I mean, even,
Yes.
if you shop in a thrift store, then you're reusing something instead of buying it new, so...
Righto. Well, good for you. And I hopefully, that as we just launched this episode, we're getting people to think. That's what this is all about. But let's get right into this. Our first story, I have to tell you right off the bat, I absolutely love the idea, the concept. And some are describing this as really a revolution, the beginning steps of a revolution in the traditional work world. And it all comes from Spain.
It does. Spain is taking this major step of becoming one of the first countries in the world to trial a 4-day work week. So at the end of the week, workers would spend fewer hours in the office, but they wouldn't get any less pay. So this is a trial. It'll be 3 years. Spain itself is going to fund 50 million euros. That's about 74 million Canadian dollars. And that's to make up the difference in salary in case it doesn't quite go as planned. They think there'll be about 200 companies taking part, 3,000 to 6,000 employees. So what they think is the 4-day work week will actually increase productivity. People will be more focused. They'll have better mental health. It'll help the economy because then they have extra days to actually go out and do the things they want to do. And of course, 1 day less of the commute. So just think of all of the pollution that's cutting down on all the commute, the cars, even maybe it would require less buses if it's mass transit. And the other part of that, I was thinking, not just fewer cars, but if there are fewer cars on the road, the ones which are there are going to be on the road for a short amount of time. So it sounds, it sounds like a great idea. And of course, a lot of, this is a great time because people are already thinking with COVID, there's been all different ways of working from home remotely. So they're already thinking, the workplace doesn't have to be the same as it has been for decade after decade after decade. Now, there has been a good study on this. It's the Henley Business School, and they're out of a university in Britain. They say that they did a model, a test, and about 558 million fewer miles were driven by commuters. So that's almost 900 million kilometers for us Canadians. So think of all the fewer emissions. Yes.
And that's each week, which is amazing.
So, that's not insignificant. And not to mention,
at all.
Who wouldn't like a 4-day work week?
Well, and I think that is a part of it. You're right. Everybody would. I'd be totally into that, and I'm sure our viewers saying yes, bring it on. But I think that's what employers are saying. Oh, wait a minute now. So this is all about 4 days and a 3-day weekend every weekend. But I think it's important to note that this isn't just about reducing the workday schedule. It's not about cramming 5 days into 4 days. The whole philosophy is about reducing some of that workload so there is better well being, mental and physical, for your employees. And studies have proven that you can be as productive, if not more productive, because you are less stressed. So I think that's the first takeaway. The second, as you mentioned, is that it is also being funded, this little experiment, if you will, this project. So it's a good incentive for companies to say, hey, you know what? I'm willing to try it because there's minimal risk to me, right? It's
Exactly.
not going to cost me a lot. Let's see where it goes. But the other thing is, when you mentioned about less, drive time, the amount of miles or kilometers driven each day, that is huge. Absolutely huge. One, to reduce emissions, but also what goes along with that. So that means people are less in traffic, so less stress, because the commute, we can relate certainly, pre-COVID, sitting and driving for, your morning commute, it is stressful. And depending on how far you live from where you work, it could be an hour and a half, 2 hours a day that you're just sitting in your car. But the other thing is, it means those who are out on the streets and in neighborhoods, it's also healthier for them because air pollution still remains the biggest killer on the planet. Premature deaths and environmental causes that add to people dying. So this will help also the healthcare system. I'm not an expert in it, but if you do the math, if you look at the science, to me, it really makes sense. So I am thrilled about this. Now, the concept of 4 days has been around for a very long time. But they're the first to really try this as a very wide spectrum, correct?
As a real full-on trial like this, yeah, New Zealand's prime minister has kind of casually floated the idea before. In Finland, they've talked about it a lot, but it doesn't seem like it's really gaining traction at this point. Sweden
Yeah.
tried something a few years ago with a shorter work week. Didn't really help the environment because it was 32 hours, but still spread over 5 days. And unlike that study of Britain, in which almost every review, every feedback was positive from both the
Yeah.
corporations and the individuals, they had it kind of backfired in some cases where employees they were stopped from using their phone whatsoever, banned from social media. They felt like they were really being pushed to get all that work done in fewer hours. So it wasn't a very pleasant place to be. So although they were there fewer hours, it wasn't that pleasant. Now, the cynic in me also brings up other parts of this. So, yes, easier commute, fewer days of the week, but I feel like then people adapt to that in different ways. So, if I'm only commuting 4 days a week, maybe
Yeah.
I'm okay to buy a place further away from my workplace and have a longer commute because now it's only 4 days a week. So, in the end, I'm not actually contributing any less pollution. There's things like that I feel like,
Yeah.
and all these fun things people are going to go and do with their extra day, they might be driving around to them. So how much of a difference at the end of the day? And that's, one of the things that this trial
Yeah.
will show.
Well, I think you're right about that. The green dividend may be compromised on some level, especially if you're looking in Europe. You know, that means you have a 3-day weekend, and let's face it, if you wanted to fly for a 3-day weekend in Europe, I mean, you can get a pretty cheap flight, less than €100 and go to a different country. And flying is a very bad thing for the environment. Now, this might be really, pulling things apart under a microscope, but I do think they're going to have to look at that. The other side of it is during summertime, depending on where you are, if we have, the searing heat because of climate change, or where we're having more warm days, that means you're in the home longer. You're also using the AC more. And yeah, that might, on a small scale like this, where it's only thousands of people. But if it were on major nations, like if Canada and the U.S. started to adopt it, I don't think America would ever even try it, just for the record. But now we're talking about hundreds and thousands of people who are using more in terms of electricity, that sort of thing. So I love it. I think the benefits are across the board on so many levels. And I think this is the beginning stages in terms of it's very clever. It's partially funded. so there's no loss. Let's pick it apart in 3 years and see what the numbers say. I know there's one Canadian connection, and again, because of COVID, um, we have proven that you had to adapt on many levels. Shopify Canada is trying a trial version with their employees. And so far, nothing negative as of yet, but again, it's a trial. So I'm excited about this. I hope that some sort of program like this would start here.
Absolutely. There are a few major corporations which have tried it, but you kind of have to be big enough to absorb it, if you know what I mean,
You're right.
in this trial basis if it doesn't work. And that's why Spain is so unique because they're actually funding it.
Well, I look forward to following that story. I think it's amazing. So good stuff. Now, our next piece is another story that actually revolves around spending time indoors in your home. And it comes down to the impact that we're having when we're using some of those products in our home, whether it's the spray-on deodorant, hairspray, disinfectants, which we're using very often now because of COVID. A new study says, in fact, that household aerosol products emit more harmful VOCs than vehicles do, which is pretty profound. This is a UK-based study. So the whole idea is the VOCs, the volatile organic compounds. And this is where it gets really interesting because on one hand, it has the VOCs, but it's a part of a bigger equation, which is the nitrogen oxide, which is already coming from vehicles and emissions. It's in our atmosphere. Even lightning actually generates it naturally. But you put those two and then sunlight. So that is the secret recipe where it becomes a photochemical like smog, and it can affect your health. It can also affect plants, agriculture. And again, we think, okay, I don't know if you use hairspray at home or not, and you're thinking, okay, I'm one person, I use one can. But the stats on this, they're saying 25 billion cans a year are being used around the world. So again, collectively, it's a concern.
It seems hard to believe, especially when you think of some of the developing countries that don't have strict emission controls, like, say, Europe, North America, that kind of thing. On the flip side, though, as you mentioned, I mean, it does seem like one person, but if you've ever spent much time in a hair salon, I don't know how, honestly, I mean, there's been studies on the health of the hairdressers because all of this spray going on. And the thing is, this is such a simple fix for so many of these things. You don't need an aerosol version. You really don't. And even for hairspray, there's a big difference between the aerosol, which is the pressurized and has all the chemicals, and the liquid spray, where it's just a mechanical spray of the actual liquid, which then it doesn't have all of those other chemicals.
Well, and that's the thing. The solution is very easy, as you said. Virtually every product should have something comparable, maybe even the same brand, is started to, adapt into different types, like you said, just a pump spray. But it is really easy. And I thought about this. I have not used, being in the TV biz like you, we used to use a lot of hairspray, in the makeup room, that sort of thing. For me, probably it's been over 10 years that we've had an aerosol hairspray in the home. There are some other things that, like disinfectants, we've adopted now also into pump sprays. So if just one of our viewers, now is aware of that and starts to change what they are using and buying, it does have an impact, a positive one. So that's what I'm looking forward to is, spreading that message and getting, people to understand that solutions are easy, generally speaking, and this is one of them.
Is another one, telling cosmetics companies stop making aerosol hairspray, figure it out another way? Or is it just consumers, doing it with your wallet kind of a thing? And it's not just them, cleaners. A lot of household cleaners are aerosol that don't need to be.
And yeah, you're right. You could go to any grocery store and down the cleaning aisle, those sort of products, and it's wall to wall. It's interesting because back in the 80s, it was the CFCs that was banned, right? Because it was ozone depleting. And again, that's another success story where science got together with Joe Public and said, hey, we have to stop this. And it has almost returned to back where it should be in terms of the ozone because we stopped that. So I think that they are being more aware of it. I think they are also still catering to a convenience factor and brand loyalty. This is, a product that they've used for many, many years. It works for them, so, you're bonded with that. But I think it's going to evolve. I don't think you're going to have a choice. And if consumers demand it, it's going to be expedited. So that's what it comes down to. So maybe, one more call to action. If you are really close to a certain brand, you really like what they do, send them an email. It sounds like it's so insignificant, but it's not. If everybody did that, said, hey, I really love your product, but I'm not going to buy it anymore because it comes in an aerosol can. Can you make a pump variety? And the change can begin. So I think this could be a win-win for everybody. Let's switch gears, though, and get to our next story. This is really interesting because you have an artist who is really very talented, and he is trying to send an eco message in a bottle, and he has many bottles to utilize. Tell me about it.
Yes, he's repurposing that phrase, message in a bottle, which traditionally has been, we picture a person on a deserted island and their cry for help, or even just a message floating across, a love letter or something floating across the oceans through time. He's saying a message in a bottle is the ocean's cry for help. Now, this is a French artist. He lives in Taiwan, Jean Scuderi. I'll probably pronounce that wrong.
Jean Scuderi.
Jean Scuderi, yes. And so he goes to the beach and just starts picking up plastics they've washed ashore, goes around, and unfortunately, it's very easy for him to do this. There's a lot to choose from.
Right.
He picks it up, he takes it back to his studio, and he uses them to create art. And some of it you can tell what it was, but some of it, you have no idea. He'll cut apart plastic bottles and use kind of like a welder or something to heat up the plastic.
Yeah,
a little torch. There you go. And some of it reminds me of blown glass sculptures, that kind of thing. And he makes sure every piece of what he picks up is used. So some individually, on a small sculpture. Yeah. Other times he'll slice up a plastic bottle and meld a bunch of pieces together to create a really strong, sort of like a stick, which will help support a bigger sculpture. Yeah. So really, I love it. Remember the saying, one person's trash is another person's treasure. I think this really epitomizes that. And he doesn't mince words. He has fun names for a lot of his art pieces, which really tells you what he thinks about the people throwing plastic away and using it in the first place.
And that's the connection here. It's not only an artist's expression, but he's using social media to really spread a message. Yes, it's kind of cool. He makes these unique things. We're showing our viewers some of these now. Like the dragon is very cool, and also it is neat, isn't it? And the fact that he's got this other one now that he made sort of stop motion. He made these plastic mutants, and he actually made it into a mini movie. So it's very cool, very engaging, and maybe that's what you need to do, especially when you're using a platform such as Instagram, because it does catch attention and it gets people thinking. The plastic problem has been around for many, many years, and I think we're getting a little better in understanding it. But this is just one more, version. Now, clearly, he's not the only one, because I remember back a couple of years ago at the zoo, they also had a washed ashore exhibit where they had a whole bunch of different sculptures, very large pieces made out of just pieces of plastic found in the ocean. So there have been many trying to do this, but this is he's sort of just a lone wolf and his mission, right?
Yeah, and he's kind of, just doing it himself, not in collaboration, not just as an exhibit. Here we are, we're doing this to make a point, right? It's an ongoing project. And as you mentioned, there have been others, not necessarily the ocean. There's an Australian sculptor. He uses scrap metal for all of his sculptures. And some of it, you can see what it was, and it adds a whole extra layer to it. There's another artist who makes all of his sculptures out of recycled toys. Think of all the plastic in all those toys. Some of his sculptures are as many as 3,000 pieces of toy in one sculpture. And again, they come to life, and it's a way of on the one hand showing this negative thing of what's happening in our world, but also turning it into a positive and, as we mentioned before, a talking point. So people will look and say, this is happening. This is real. Look how much there is.
Well, and it's endless. One report I was reading was estimating every second 20,000 bottles of water are purchased somewhere in the world. Every second. And the pop industry has taken note. It's, bottled water is a $300 billion industry. And the biggest makers or manufacturers are now pot makers. They know that the biggest sales are from people consuming water, not their beverage. So they said, we're going to start selling that as well. And I think the real problem is, ever since, the plastic bottle was really conceived, the whole idea was single use. And I think we have to shift our mindset. Yes, there's convenience there, but now I've got this product that is there forever. So yes, I've quenched my thirst, and yes, I may be responsible and I'll throw it in a recycle bin, but it's there really forever. It never disintegrates. It takes hundreds of years, right?
Yeah, and I mean, you said it, convenience. That's what people are all about. It just brought up, there was a national park we were at once in Hawaii, and we went in, we hadn't brought water with us. They did not sell bottled water. They did sell, reusable bottles that you would use again and again right next to a water fountain. So they made a point. You're not bringing, plastic bottles into our park. We're not going to add to the problem. Here's your alternative. Use it or be thirsty.
No, I think it's great. I think, maybe more have to do that. Like shifting the mindset, like with plastic bags, right? When it first came out, people were like, oh my goodness, that's convenience. Now I got to bring my own bags. It's almost second nature now to many, many people. There may still be that odd occasion, you're running in quickly, you got to get stuff, and you don't have a bag. But overall, I think a majority of the public now have accepted that and really propel it forward. So I think this might be the next thing that needs to happen. And I think you just highlighted a great example. Maybe more and more companies, whether it's nature parks or just businesses, say, we're not going to permit bottled water, single-use plastic in the place.
And on the shopping, you'd be amazed at how many groceries, when I forget the bags, I can balance in my hands. I'm like walking out like this. People are like, make way because I can't see where I'm going and things are falling. But
you should put that on maybe Instagram.
That's an extra challenge to the whole otherwise boring endeavor.
There it is. It'll go viral. This has been a lot of fun, Christina. We'll have to leave it there. We're out of time, but I want to thank you once again for joining us, and we look forward to connecting next week.
Absolutely. Thank you.
All right. Now, we always appreciate your time, too, my friends. Thanks for watching. If you're watching us on Facebook, please like, share, and follow my page. And, of course, here on YouTube, we ask if you're enjoying what you're watching, give us the thumbs up and subscribe to the channel. That'll really help us propel the message forward. Until next time, I'm Anwar Knight. Stay safe, be well, and we'll see you here on the Blue Farm.